Okay, well, welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. And I'm blessed to have Mohammed Iqbal. He's the founder and CEO of Sweatworks. You may not have heard the company, but I'm sure you've engaged with the work they do in supporting many of the platforms out there that enable fitness and wellness. So in the FitTech space. So Mohammed, thanks for taking the time to join with me.
Scott, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, the fun part about social media is you get to learn so many things across different domains, and discovered you and Sweatworks, and then found out you're right around the corner from me. I'm in the Haymarket area. You're in the Arlington area. So we're not all that far from each other, but, the rise in technology and advancing fitness and wellness, more and more so, and especially the last few years, it really became prevalent with the pandemic. And I think my understanding is your company is heavily involved on the back end of that. So maybe give a little bit on your backstory on Sweatworks and kind of that, I'll call it the Genesis 1-1 story of how you got started in that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that kind of goes way back. So let me take a couple of minutes and give you some background on myself, because I think that definitely played a role in the how and the why behind Sweatworks. I was born in Dubai. My parents are from Sri Lanka originally. I've never lived there. Beautiful country. And spent the first 11 years in the Middle East, right? And I think there, now that I look back, health and wellness was something that was just innate in kind of how we worked. I walked to school. My parents, swam, ran. My dad played squash almost daily. Healthy food was just available, right? It wasn't, I looking back now, I ate almost no processed food, nothing in a box. And I think we valued things like family time, in the morning, in the evening, holidays. And it was a good time. I had a very good childhood, but it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was completely open. It was structured. It wasn't as diverse. I was limited on choices. I didn't know that, right? I had maybe 5 channels on TV. And after the first Gulf War, not that we were personally impacted, but it was certainly adjacent, to where we were. And it was close enough where my parents wanted to leave the area and really, search for a better life for me and my sister. So we came to New Jersey. And so after we came to New Jersey, it was the opposite of that, right? Yeah. I went, I lived close to a grocery store called ShopRite. We, the cereal boxes, like the aisles of cereal boxes were, I think, bigger than the entire grocery stores that I grew up next to. I saw a lot of processed foods, and I kind of really dove into, what it's like to be American, which is enjoying everything in mass volume, right? There was no limit. Like, interestingly, even the size of the cereal bowls that I grew up with and the size of cereal bowls when I came here are like 2 different sizes. They're just so much larger.
Really?
Yeah. And the spoons are bigger. Like the spoons that I ate were bigger. Utensils were bigger. Everything was just more. And in a couple of years, from 11 to 13, I went from not a super skinny kid, but I was a healthy kid, to one that was overweight. I didn't feel good about myself. And of course, to add to it, things like in school, when I went to school in Dubai, I wore a uniform, right? Everyone dressed the same.
Okay. And even the public school system?
Even the public school systems over there. Yeah. So the good thing about that is, again, uniformity. And it didn't matter, if you were a rich family or a poor family, everyone wore the same clothes. And you come here, and I'm a product of the public schools, and you wear what you want. And I think we don't realize it today, but choice is good, because you're really getting involved in choice early on. But I think it also sets you apart, sometimes in a good way where you could be an individual, and I think sometimes in not a great way, where you might want something that someone else has, and as a child you can't really process that type of emotion. So I think as an immigrant, coming in, I had a heavy accent. My mom, I think went to like Walmart and bought me what was cool. I think I looked like a Rastafarian the first day of school. Obviously, everything is well-intentioned, but I kind of stuck out in more than one way. So I went through grade school and middle school, and then when I went to high school, um, again, fully enamored in this Western American life. Back then in the 90s, they had something called the President's Challenge. I'm sure you might
Yeah.
remember, but
Yes, I
we
do.
don't have more, right? And I think, when I did that, I thought it was fun, like this is cool. But what it gave me was a benchmark. What it gave me was a position in terms of where I was as a kid, as a freshman in high school. And what I found out was that I was at the bottom of my class of girls and guys. And I specifically remember completing the mile because we all went outside on the track and kind of ran around the track 4 times. And I was the last one to finish. And I was like exhausted. I didn't feel good. And I didn't get bullied and it wasn't like that, but I knew I had to make a change.
Sure.
And I wanted to make a change. So I went ahead and I picked up a book called Optimum Sports Nutrition, which is published in 93. So it's like a new book, at the time. I took up inline skating and then turned that into running and then went into biking. And I committed to being better. And then by my senior year, I set the mile record in my high school of 4:32. So I did a mile under 21 minutes in my freshman year. And then I set the mile record at my senior year. So what that taught me, I think that right there is the crux of why I wanted to form Sweatworks, is because the gap between my own personal development was really access to knowledge, and I think the willingness to execute on a plan. And that was it. So I went from being last to being first, but everything else around me was the same. I had the same parents, I went to the same school, I had the same circle of friends. But I made that leap. And I think, as I started working, a lot of people said, look, once you go to college, you're going to gain the freshman 15. I heard that might be the freshman 20. That didn't happen because I committed to my own self-care and wellness. And people said, look, I started working at Sharp Electronics and putting in 100+ hour weeks. And everyone said, oh, you're going to gain some weight there. You won't be able to commit to your wellness. But I did. And along the way, not only did I commit to it, but it got improved. And I kept on hearing the barriers, right? Okay, when you start working, when you get married, when you have a child, you're going to change. And it just didn't happen. And when I go back and again, in my 20s, I look at these significant milestones which enriched my life. They were made so much richer because I committed to self-care. Because I was able to commit to self-care and feel good about myself, I was able to empower and help other people live their best life, right? So whether it's work, whether it's my wife, whether it's my children. So I said, I kind of unlocked something here. Clearly, there's a lot of people who have found what I found, and they're at the gym, they're triathletes, they're runners. But it was still a very, elite kind of concept, because even if you had someone who's never stepped foot into a gym, even a regular big box gym, it's intimidating. You walk in and you don't know what you're doing. You end up walking on the treadmill for 20 minutes, then you quit after 6 weeks. The average new member in a big box gym today quits after 6 weeks. And forget going to a CrossFit or into this before CrossFit, or into a Soul Cycle. It's so intimidating. You don't know, and people are just have little cliques and communities. And so I knew that, or if you want to participate in a triathlon, that's cost, time, and there's so many barriers of entry there. So I said, well, how can we use data, right? How can we use the lifelong, or my 10, 15-year journey, which is really not quick fixes, right? If I look back at my journey, even in high school, I talked about a 4-year journey. Yeah. Right? It wasn't about a 7-minute workout. It wasn't about a 30-day or 90-day fix. It was about behavioral and lifestyle changes. I did my MBA in 2008, and one of my first year project was to come up with a business plan and a concept. And I said, I'm going to combine my passion for wellness with this business concept. And the idea was to really make data-driven decisions on digital products to nudge people towards positive behavior in wellness. And it could be with wherever you are and whatever modality or type of life you like to live. And it was well received. And in 2012, I kind of took that initial framework of an idea, and I had you could either start a product company, a B2C company, or I could, to me, I thought there are so many great brands out there that already had a captured audience and do what they do very well. So why do I need to figure out how to be an operator? Why do I need to figure out the modality, or why do I need to figure out how to do coaching and nutrition? People already do that very well, and it works. But how do I make that more accessible? And that's the premise behind Sweatworks. That
is an awesome story. I love it because there's so many things that you touch on around, what I call I'll say the last mile, in just deciding to make that choice, and then those barriers to entry around culture that you experience throughout life as being an immigrant, but also just in high school, in an interesting age of life. But you decided during that time to make that change. And I think culturally, you mentioned in America, the pro and con of it, where it cuts negatively, is there's so much abundance that it's hard to get down to that little thing to make the optimal choice. And it's like you get overwhelmed by choice. And then it creates kind of like the pause and the procrastination.
Look, in business, sometimes if you get deep into data and analysis, there's a term called paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
Right. And that I think is true in the choices that we have. You mentioned overwhelmed. I think people are overwhelmed. And when you get overwhelmed by the choices that you have to make, and you have to make decisions, you retreat back and revert back into what you know. So if that's eating sugary cereals, because that's what you have as a kid, or having that blueberry muffin, that's, what you're going, that's what the comfort is. It's what you're going to go back into. So, but I think people like choice, and I think choice is a good thing, but people want to know that you're giving them informed choices, right? Give them 5, not 50, right, and then have them pick from 5 good informed choices.
Yeah. So in your personal journey, looking back, what was, you kind of mentioned it, but what was the pivot point for you? You're like, and you just made that change, and then you I want to say but you continued to make that change and live that way. And then how did you handle any kind of cultural pushback? That so many of us, I think, regardless of age, deal with.
That's a really good question. I think one, I'm just a learner. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a student of the world, and I'm not just saying that to be cliche, but I think I learn every day, right? I learn every day from meeting people, from talking to people, and explaining things to people. I've always said that if teachers and professors are just a week ahead of the rest of their class, but they sound so much smarter. And I think sometimes teachers are the best learners, right? Because they have to always be a week ahead, so they're constantly always learning. I feel like that's just an innate quality, and I've always had that even as a child. I've always been someone who's curious, and I think the other part is commitment, and the desire and the will to be better tomorrow than you are today, in whatever capacity that is. So to me, I've always kind of distilled the things that are important to me, right? Whether it is my wellness, my family, and just keep it very simple, keep it to 5 things that are important to me at any given time, and just focus on that and do those things really well and continue to do better. I think I've had that quality since a child, and my parents tell me that. That's probably what kind of kept this going. So
if I could summarize, you kind of determine your values and live them out.
Yes.
That's fair.
Yeah, and I value time. I really value time. And I don't watch a lot of TV. But I enjoy TV. I enjoy shows, but it's not the important thing in my life. Right? When I go to bed at night, I'm not watching TV. To me, it's not a habit. Watching TV is not a habit. For so many people, it's like, you go to dinner, you put on CNN, and it becomes a habit. But it never, that habit never became a thing for me. Gotcha.
So let me keep pulling on this thread a little bit. As a founder, CEO, you have I think around 100 employees. 200. How do you instill that within the context of a company leading people to enable them to kind of live their values out as well?
Yeah, it's not easy, and that's what I've learned. I think something that's been really humbling over the last couple of years is not everyone's like you, and you're really a product of your environment, the people that and your life circumstances, right? I think the fact that I've had this journey, the fact that I was in the Middle East and had access to healthy food and limited choices. And then I saw the change coming here. I mean, not everyone has the same stories. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
you're going to be a product of your circumstances that you've lived through, and that's fine. I really think it's by showing examples and by pointing out to use cases and by committing to time and knowing that change happens over a long period. It takes years to instill change. And even now, when we make organizational changes within the company, I'm very careful about saying that results aren't going to happen in a quarter, but they're going to happen over several quarters. And we should judge ourselves on that. But from a lifestyle perspective, I think, it's a little bit easier for us because, yes, we have a 200-person company, but we live and breathe this. Like, this is literally what we do. And a lot of people come here to work because they're also committed to their own wellness journey, whether they're getting started or whether they're deep in it. So it's a little bit easier for us to kind of live this life. But it's the little things that matter. It's the kind of snacks we have in our fridge. It's the kind of, restaurants that we pick when we go out to eat. It's things like that we started this year, like our wellness days where we are committing to just turning off, canceling all meetings for us and all of our clients. It's those types of things that I think you really have to commit to action, and you have to create the change, not expect the change to happen organically. As our executive team and leadership, we've got to create the change and just, again, not expect it to just happen.
Yeah. So the word expected. So like, how do you set expectations within yourself? Because culture change, like you're saying, it's that, 10-year overnight success, right? All of what we're talking about is a bit of a, as I call it, a pennies add up to dollars method that scales eventually. How do you maintain that perspective?
That's a good question, and it's gotten obviously harder as we've grown. I mean, I used to know everyone's stories. I used to speak to everyone every day. I used to know the names of everyone in the company, and I just don't anymore. I just try to be more present. I try to be more available. Whenever I get an opportunity to speak to team members, I want to hear what they have to say, and I think it's really important to get past the executive and leadership level, because you get so caught up on OKRs and metrics and KPIs, and I mean, you forget that ultimately it's the people that really matter. And how do you and I'll tell you what, I mean, during the pandemic, a lot of good things were outcomes of it, but one thing that I'm really struggling with is I really miss that connection, because now, instead of hiring from our core offices, we've kind of gone out and grab talent wherever we can, which is great because it gives opportunity, allows us to scale. But at the same time, what I'm learning is that it's missing that connection that we had. So that's definitely been a challenge. But I think we've worked by setting up policies and procedures, reminding people to take time off, reminding people to engage in their own wellness, the God vacation days, making that a priority, and making sure that we're in front of it. It's something that we've had to do.
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging to hear and see. And I think individually and just at work on a day job, a Fortune 5. And, I started this podcast based on my own corporate burnout, basically, of doing all the things all at once. And it's definitely interesting to kind of wrestle with that culture. And I'm starting to see that reclaiming of it at a corporate level. Obviously, there's the boundaries that you can only go so far, but it's encouraging to see the companies like yourself starting to really speak into that, to encourage people and kind of destigmatize that overworking mentality.
Yeah, I think we're coming out of this culture, especially in tech, where overwork is a badge of honor.
100%.
And you kind of wear that in your sleeve. And I think the pandemic exacerbated that, to be quite honest, because now, even there's no door that you walk into, there's no office that you walk into, and products like Slack, which I love, but it also created the need, even worse than email, right? You got to respond now. I mean, I think, going back to 2008, I remember getting my first BlackBerry,
Yeah.
and you're always available, right? You're on
Yep.
BlackBerry Messenger, you are on email now. And I remember, going to my own managers and getting an email, but feel like I had to respond. And that became the expectation. Then you've had the advances in communication and collaboration tools, and people have this need to always respond. So I think being in management, I'm very clear and say, look, I work really odd hours. I work all the time. I don't expect you to do that, nor should you do that, nor do I want you to do that.
Yeah.
So then I would tell people to don't respond to things if you get it at, late at night at 10 p.m. or early in the morning. But that still doesn't work, because I think it's one thing to say that, but of course they get an email from someone or a Slack message, and they're like, oh, I feel like I have to respond. I want to show that I'm committed.
Yeah.
You don't. So now I'm a bit more cognizant of that, and I schedule messages. I mean, I might write something or work on something, I'll schedule it to go out at a time, because you don't want to create that anxiety and have your heart rate rise. And that's never the intention behind it.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And it cuts both ways, right? The accessibility is great, where you can do things wherever, and you can maybe head out on that vacation a few days early and be in a beautiful spot, but then you can also still have that tethered and feel like you should be on vacation, and then you're still going and checking the phone or the laptop. Those blurred lines, as I call them, that intentionality is really a critical need.
Yeah, and that's a culture thing. You've got to create it and say, look, when someone's on vacation, they're on vacation. Don't bother them. And and it's funny when people say things like, I'm not going to have internet, I'm going to turn off the phone. It's unfortunate that you have to say that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that wasn't the case in the 70s and 80s. When you were on vacation, you were on vacation. There's just no way to get a hold of you. And I think that reset, that recharge, is so necessary for us, like emotionally, physically. And it's hard to engage in that today in this always on kind of world that we live in.
Yeah. And I think with the rise of terms like hustle culture and, hustle and grind or get her done, and it almost seems a conflict of interest, but it's not. I think it's just an omitted conversation point of having that demarcation, or the third leg of having that rest and that off time.
I've definitely struggled with that, Scott. So, I mean, you brought some really good points. I'll add one more, and that's the side hustle, right? And it's like this idea of doing more work, putting in the hours. And look, there are social media influencers out there that say you need to be working all the time. You have to be working all the time. I think what gets missed there, one, it sets an expectation of if you're not working, you have a sense of guilt. Well, I could be doing something else.
100%.
And I think that, look, if you have a day job, and even when I started, Sweatworks before 2012, when I was building out the concept, I did have a day job. And then I put time into this just to kind of prove out the concept and see and help validate the business idea. But it wasn't like I spent 8 hours working and 8 hours on my side hustle. It was a couple hours a week. It was more, it was a hobby. It was something that I did, part-time, not supplementing my income, right? With the side hustle. It was something that I really enjoyed doing. It was a passion project for me. Mm-hmm. And that's very different than how people view side hustles today. That doesn't give you that chance to turn off, because you're constantly moving from one thing into something else. And I don't think that's healthy. And we still live in that culture today. I mean, I still look at younger people, wanting to have the regular job and then excited about the side hustle. And then that leads to burnout. What ends up happening is you don't do either well. You are not performing in your day job. And then you're wondering why you get passed up for that promotion and why you're not, happy. And in your side hustle, you're up against people that are fully committed to that category, whatever the product might be that you're working on, a service that you're working on. Yeah. And it doesn't take off either. So you end up getting frustrated on both fronts.
Yeah. And I can certainly relate to that too, and it's that tension again, between what you're speaking to, but then also if you're in a corporate job that, doesn't necessarily scratch the passion portion of your life, and you want to find that thing that, kind of gets you joy. Whether it's, for a while I was a coach for youth cross country. So it was, a couple of days a week and I loved it. I love coaching. So I would get that joy out of it, but then I've still got my corporate job that covers, all the lifestyle change things we need as a father and family member.
I think the difference there, and look, my wife was a cross country coach, high school cross country coach, and we're both runners. But I think the difference there, at least from the example that you said, is that was a passion for you. It was never meant to turn into like a full-time gig. It was never meant to, be a way to provide for your family, right? And It was really something that you were passionate about, that you enjoyed doing, and that's recovery. That's reset, right? You're working on something. You're empowering young kids. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
But it's not a lot of the side hustles that we see today.
Yeah. So FitTech, it seems like that's the new .com. As I dig further and further into various things myself and seeing the rise of various applications, whether it's, fitness to even access to nutrition, supplementation, and things of that nature, and personalization. How do you see technology continuing down that path to really get it to more hands, especially those who really need that kind of support?
Yes, I think the timing is right. You have devices like the iPhone. You've had advances in cloud technology. You've had advances in hardware. And now all of these things have come together. So the infrastructure is there to allow companies like us and a lot of other innovative fitness companies to finally build a product that is meaningful, right? That is relevant. I'll give you a good example. Even if you look at the first version of the Apple Watch, didn't have GPS on it. So Runkeeper was the first iPhone running app that used GPS in the iPhone. They then built an Apple Watch app that worked without the phone, but it was using the pedometer, right? And it had no heart rate monitor. So again, you had a good concept in a running application, but without really having great heart rate data and GPS data. What could you do with that? Yeah. The next evolution happened, and now they've added GPS, and then they've added better heart rate monitoring and so on and so forth. So I think now where we are in FitTech, and the reason why it is growing and continues to grow is really a product of two things. I think the pandemic certainly helped, and even before the pandemic, we saw this trending upwards where people are valuing and investing in their own health and wellness, and there's a lot of adjacencies that led to that. And we can come back to that here in a minute. And the second one is the advances in technology and the commitment from big technology companies like Apple and Google to say, we see a gap here in healthcare. We want to disrupt it. The healthcare industry is not going to change itself clearly, because that's another whole conversation. Yeah. And we want to focus on preventative measures. We want to create the platform and the tools and the knowledge centers to help people help themselves. Yeah. Right. So when you have those two things come together, where consumers have gotten more informed, more involved, and are more passionate and want to invest more, and then you've got technology that has now come up to a level where it is more accessible, and you have the platform and the rails to kind of create product, it opens the gate. And I think that's why you see this boom happening. And I think it's going to continue to happen for the next decade.
Yeah, I think it's super encouraging. And you kind of touch on the concept of really empowering the individual to make better choices for themselves and have that access that historically, I think with a lot of these apps, they're starting to include some semblance of coaching. And I think that is such a key element to really help with that behavior change to get to that point, so that people at scale can kind of make the choice you made as a high school freshman, right? And make that choice. But then you've got the support also to enable that.
I think coaching is critical. And I'll add one more thing. It's personalization. I think you touched on that a couple of minutes ago, talking about the personalization of these products. And that's really important because we are all individuals, and a program that works for you. I mean, you were coaching runners. I've never been a running coach, but if you looked at my running and I had a goal, you would kind of curate a personal running program that's based off of my strengths, builds on my weaknesses, and helps me achieve my time for my race. You would go ahead and do that, right? Right. But today, I think coming in now, we've seen a lot of programs that are just cookie cutter, like that, where here's 90 days to get shredded, and everyone kind of does the same thing, right?
Right.
It doesn't work that way. And I think even when you look at food and supplementation, there is no one-a-day pill. I mean, there is a one-a-day pill, but it reacts and responds differently to everyone. When with advances in blood analysis, biomarkers, and even DNA, we're able to look at things like, hey, you know what? You need to have 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C, but you don't absorb it really well. So we're going to give you something else that increases your vitamin C absorption. That wasn't something that technology was able to do 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We just didn't have the tools to do that. But today we do. And there's so many ways to help us get there. So, going back to my freshman year of high school and the President's Challenge, that was an assessment. Like ultimately that was an assessment, and it set the benchmark. And I feel like in a wellness journey, if I can use the analogy of a GPS, in order to know where you're going, in order to get better, you need to know where you're going to start. And assessments provide that for you. That is the President's Challenge that we had in high school that we don't have today. I don't know why, as a society, we've evolved into being like anti-assessments, or saying this is where you are. And there's nothing wrong with running a 22-minute mile like I did. Absolutely nothing. It is where I am in my moment today. And I know where I am, and I can't go where I want to go if I don't know where I am. So the beauty about technology today is we've got a plethora of assessment options. There are DNA analysis that's super simple to do. If you've done 23andMe, we have several partners. You just upload the results, and it'll immediately tell you kind of the things to stay away from, or what you're kind of supposed to be like, and it's pretty good. You can go deeper into blood analysis. You can go deeper into like using CGM-based products. And I think that's a big difference. So today we're able to really understand more about you and then personalize your journey.
Yeah. And I think the encouraging thing about the personalization, I think the hitch and the giddy up and why it's been hard for folks is that comparison trap. And I think the personalization helps reframe it, that it's always been there, but been hard. It's you against you yesterday. It's not you and I are not competitors per se. And I had one coach tell me, really, it's looking at people differently as time travelers. That if you're where I want to be, then find a way to learn from them to get to how it's applicable to you. Not necessarily say, oh, we're both 46 and they're doing this and I'm not. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And look, I've never been a fan of the scale. I think these comparisons of like weight loss are not really relevant. BMI, I don't think was ever a relevant metric in anyone who was knowledgeable or in health and wellness, right? That was just something that was created and kind of came into reasons behind it, obviously. But those are metrics that I just don't follow. And to your point, it's really you versus you. It's not about comparing where somebody else is. It's really about where are you today and what are things that you could do to impact change. And oh, by the way, you're going to see different results, right? Because your genetics, because of your environment, because of what you have access to, you might not be able to afford the best trainer, the best foods. And even though that is changing and is going more downstream, it's still a reality today.
Yeah. Yeah. So you may have touched on it already, but what is one thing that you're kind of behind the scenes? What's one thing you're really excited about right now in the fitness space? And you're kind of like, I really want to see where this evolves to.
I'm really excited about wearables. And I know that, again, wearables is a double-edged sword, right? Because I'm wearing an Oura ring, I have an Apple Watch, I use a Polar to train. And on one hand, having these additional metrics can really actually create more anxiety. It can have the opposite effect because you look, and I haven't looked at how I slept today, but I certainly will after this. But yeah, you're like obsessed. You're waking up and you're looking at your Oura app and saying, how did you sleep? Or you're trying to close your rings from your Apple Watch, and it could have the opposite effect. But on the other hand, it also provides you insights. And I think what is measured is managed. And if you are more aware and something is more present, then you're going to be subconsciously more prone to doing better. But beyond that, being in FitTech, the data that the wearables give us and the insights that they give us allow us to help make more personalized recommendations, right? So why am I going to tell you that you need to sleep 8 hours a day when you might need to sleep 8 hours a day, but in reality, you're a dad, you're working, you're traveling. It's not realistic. So why don't I make your 7 hours a day of sleep highly effective with the sleep routine before, with a smart alarm when you wake up, advising you on what kind of foods to eat or not eat. Maybe, having that glass of wine at dinner every night is a bad idea. Enjoy your wine, but maybe not have it every night because that's impacting your sleep.
Yeah.
That's what wearables allow us to do. Whereas before, everyone would just, how many hours a day do you sleep? 8 hours a day. How many calories do you need? 2,000 calories. What is that based off of? Absolutely nothing. Not some people might, like seriously, right? Some people might need 10 hours of sleep and they have the means to get that. And other people are perfectly fine on 5 hours of sleep too. Yes. So wearables give us this, what I call the third degree or the third dimension of insight that allow us to, again, then really help drive adjacent personalizations that you would never otherwise get. And now we're seeing them not only come in better form factors. Some people don't like watches. That's fine. You can get a ring, you can get a wristband, you can have a patch. But the data that we're collecting from them are so much more accurate. I mean, one metric that we use a lot is HRV, right? For a lot of reasons. And it wasn't until the last couple of years that you could, that optical heart rate sensors have really gotten good about HRV. Before, you had to use a chest strap to get HRV, which is uncomfortable and that's inaccessible for a whole host of other reasons. And now you can get it from your watch or from your ring using optical sensors. So those types of advances, again, we're going to continue to see that. So that's probably the one thing that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to see the data and where it goes and, my own personalization. And you mentioned the anxiety. I know when I first got it, I was so intent about it. Like I was hardly out of bed and I'd be looking at my score. And at one point I literally had to stop looking at my phone. Like I still tracked it so I could look back at it later, but I had to take a pause and acknowledge that I was getting a little out of control and a little anxious or OCD with it, because I was putting too much emphasis on what that was rather than using the information to make better decisions. Absolutely.
And even sports watches have that, and even athletes or weekend warriors have that. I'll give you an example. Garmin, Polar, Strava, a lot of these products have, when you're peaking for training, when you're progressing or retraining, and that can cause
strain levels.
Yeah, the strain levels, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Same thing, right? That can cause an issue. So if I'm looking at my Garmin and it's like I'm detraining, that has the opposite effect on me emotionally. I'm like, I don't want to be training. Don't tell me I'm detraining, right? I want to be progressive moving forward. But here's the reality is, in order to move forward, you've got to take a step back. 100%. Because that is where growth happens, right? You've got to take 2 steps forward and a step and a half back. And then over time, you build up your VO2 max, your endurance, your aerobic and anaerobic capabilities. These are all things that we know. But to the average person who just bought a Garmin, they're like, no, I want to be better tomorrow than I am today. So I always want to be on training mode. That leads to overtraining. It leads to injuries. And I think
leads to burnout.
These fitness devices have to kind of change that idea and thinking into saying more no. And look, certainly the things that we work on, that is at our forefront. We will not work on projects or work on product that kind of subscribe to that type of ideology. We're going to say, we understand why you did it, but look at what the data shows. We want to help people live better lives, to perform better if that's their goal, to live longer, whatever that might be. That's not going to happen by constantly pushing them to do more every day. You've got to, again, the growth happens in the recovery, not in the training.
100%. Yeah. Premise of the podcast and respecting the rest, as I've been saying lately. And I think back of how many times I keep seeing slow to go fast is a method, in the running. The Maffetone method for a long time has been discussed and a lot of people blew it off. But again, that's goal specific too. What are you trying to achieve and to build up your endurance, which eventually leads to actually building up your speed too. So it's very counterintuitive.
If we double click on that a little bit, Scott, that's a great point. Just look at running. Running faster every day is not going to get you faster. You've got to be thoughtful around it. You've got to keep your heart rate in zone 1 to zone 2 for a long run. Incorporate interval work and incorporate speed work, and do it, twice a week. Do a long run once a week, and take that long run at a 2 minute per mile slower pace than you have to.
Yeah.
These are hard things for us to guide people on, right? But the devices that we have today, and I think if you are someone who's just coming in, is to say, I'm just going to go out for a 5K, and I did in 28 minutes. I'm going to do 27 minutes tomorrow, and then 26 minutes the next. And then all of a sudden you get a stress fracture, right? You get issues with your feet, you get burnt out, you get injured, and then you drop off and kind of fall off that journey, when that's not what running is about.
Yeah. And it's really about finding the love of it that builds to that excellence. I think, especially as somebody who's done some youth coaching, you end up overlaying the adult perspective onto youth at times to push, where it's like, hey, just go do it. The win for the day is to go for a run. Mm-hmm. Don't put any additional parameters around that. And I think even as everyday athletes like you and I, that should be our objective too, because we're not professional athletes. We're not trying to win the game. We're trying to win at life and be able to have high quality longevity. Like I want to be able to, get down with my great grandkids and, be able to take my great grandkid on in a basketball game, or whatever that is, or take them for a run. And so it's reorienting, I think, the objectives, and back to your, commentary around values, living your values out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think wearables and that data is really going to help us get there. And I think not only are companies shifting their thought because they're getting the right people in the door, but consumers are understanding that too, that again, growth happens in recovery. And look, you can apply that to work. We kicked this off kind of talking about how we manage our growing team and why we prioritize rest and recovery, right? And why we prioritize taking the vacation, just completely shutting down for 3 days a year during the week, not during the weekend. There's a big difference there, right? When you say, well, you get the weekends to get time off too. Now, everyone has times off on the weekends. And guess what? You fill it up with doing errands, taking your kids to sports. That's not
catch up on all the things.
Yeah, but if you literally take a time off on a Tuesday, just the entire company's off. You don't feel like you're missing anything because nothing's happening, right? Your clients know you're out. No one's pinging you. I have to tell you, we started doing that this year, and I'm a huge fan of it.
That's great. I appreciate you leading that way. Well, we're kind of coming up on time. I really appreciate your perspective and the ability to kind of connect two passions and skills of technology and then fitness. And it'll be interesting to see how this FitTech, I think we're just taking off again here, but it'll be interesting to see how this evolves. I like to close things out with a couple questions, a bit of a hot seat. So nothing too heavy though. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Anderson Cooper's latest book on the Vanderbilt story.
Okay, cool. Okay, what are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
I was just listening to Up First. It's NPR's daily morning podcast. It's what I like to listen to the first thing in the morning. Okay,
cool. All right, last one. What is your go-to rest and recovery method?
Foam rolling. I foam roll every day for 15 minutes, and I think it's really changed, my injuries, my performance, and I travel with the portable foam roller.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Nice. Well, Mohammed, again, thank you so much for your time, insights, and look forward to seeing where Sweatworks helps enable, the fitness community to scale.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on.